Hi, you're with India Post Live, India's first online news conversation web TV. I'm Ishan Russell, and India Post is, of course, a forum for you to participate in. You can use social media to get in touch with us. Use Twitter, hashtag India Post Live to your tweets, or use our Twitter handle at India Post Live. You can use Facebook. We have a Facebook page. Go like it and post a question over there or a comment over there. You can also use other forms of social media to come in touch with us, other forms of technology like Skype or Google Hangout to participate in a discussion, and also go to indiapostlive.com to check out this video and more. We're streaming this live, of course, right now, but you can also watch this later in case you are watching it later. Check out the other videos we have in that page for you. We also have a wall for you to comment upon those videos. All right, so what we're talking about today is the security apparatus of India that is now certainly changing, and with the new government in place, a decisive mandate, hard decisions to be expected. So what can be expected as far as the security apparatus is concerned? We have with us Mr. K.S. Subramaniam. He's a former IPS officer and authoritative voice on police, and has written a wonderful book called Political Violence and the Police in India, seminal work as far as police reform is concerned. We also have with us Surya Gangadharan. For those of you who've been watching TV for the past 20 years, he's been a familiar face. He's now the Chief Editor of Defense and Technology. Thank you very much for coming in, Surya. We are also joined by Rajeshwari Krishnamurthy. She is a research scholar at the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies, and we'll be joined by other people as well. And in case you want to come in, please go ahead and do so with Skype and Google Hangout and other forms of technology, all there in your phone, in your iPad, in your laptop to connect with us. But I'll start with you, Mr. Subramaniam. What changes can we expect? I mean, Mr. Doval is coming in as the NSA, and a decisive mandate has been given. Do we expect decisions to be that decisive also? I mean,
well, it's a new setup. The significant feature is that the Prime Minister, the new Prime Minister, has no experience of working in Delhi. He is the first time MP and first time Prime Minister.
Right.
So he's a lucky man. But the only appointment which is of significance, which I have noted after this new government came up, is the appointment of Mr. Doval, Ajit Doval, as the National Security Advisor. Now, this is a very controversial appointment, because it will fly in the face of the Foreign Service of India. Because if you want to appoint a person from the Foreign Service to advise the government in a similar capacity, then it's a question of whether he will work with the present National Security Advisor as a colleague, or as his superior, or as his subordinate. That's a complex question, and the experience in the recent period has not been extremely lovely, as noted by Sanjay Baru in his very interesting book. I think the first National Security Advisor we ever had was Mr. Brajesh Mishra. His appointment took place in 1999 after the nuclear bomb was blasted by India, and he was working very closely with the Prime Minister Vajpayee, and he combined in himself the post of the National Security Advisor and Principal Secretary to the Prime Minister. So there were no conflict. But after the new government came in, there was a problem, because they brought in Dixit as a National Security Advisor on foreign policy, and M.K. Narayanan was appointed as Security Advisor. Narayanan was not very happy, because he expected that he would be the National Security Advisor. But he himself he claims that he suggested the name of Dixit, but because he had some family problems in Chennai and he could not come. Dixit suddenly died. Then therefore the question of again having a new National Security Advisor arose. But during Dixit's time, as recorded by Sanjay Baru, both the National Security Advisor and the Security Advisor were openly quarreling in front of the Prime Minister, on their respective turfs. So that was a very unfortunate thing, and been very well recorded by Baru. And it is likely to cause difficulties in the present setup also. What sort of foreign policy or foreign office or foreign service officer the government is planning to bring? And what sort of role he will really play vis-a-vis the foreign secretary, the foreign minister, and the National Security Advisor is not at all clear.
Absolutely, and I want to get in Surya on this, because Surya, the Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj and the Prime Minister Narendra Modi do not share the best of friendships, and given the fact that you have an NSA who's not from the Foreign Service, which was traditionally, I mean, how does the external security angle come in?
I think the IB does have some responsibility, correct me if I'm wrong, sir, but I think the IB does have some responsibility for India's own near abroad, Nepal and Myanmar and Bangladesh. I think there is some kind of monitoring that they do. So in that sense, the IB is not entirely divorced from some of the security issues that we have with some of our neighbors. As far as external is concerned, there is some talk, I understand, of Mr. Jaishankar, who's currently ambassador in Washington, coming in as some kind of a foreign policy advisor to Narendra Modi. But I think Modi also has his own think tank going, and some of those decisions you saw at the swearing in itself, you had the representative from Taiwan who was there at the swearing in, you had the Tibetan exile Prime Minister Lobsang Sengye who was there. So these are all indicators that Modi is perhaps receiving inputs from multiple sources. He's not going to be only looking at a bureaucratic kind of input coming in. And how this will play out in the course of the next few months is something we still have to wait and see. But he seems to have made a fairly decent beginning. You've had a brief chat with the Pakistani Prime Minister, in fact with most SAARC members. And he's now going to Bhutan, I understand. And the Chinese foreign minister is here, all within a few weeks of Modi coming in. So let's see how things play out.
Do you see the PMO playing a more important role as far as foreign policy is concerned than the Foreign Office itself?
That's what we understand, because if he doesn't share, as you said, he doesn't share that great an equation with Sushma Swaraj. Modi has already retained for himself the right to summon all the set the broad policy directions and summon the secretaries of various ministries. So, I mean, there's, I think, going to be a very strong PMO, and Modi is a strong guy.
So, and, super PMO might be.
It could well be.
But quite apart from the preferences of the present Prime Minister, the Prime Minister's office have always played a decisive role in foreign policy, because right from Jawaharlal Nehru's time, foreign policy decisions were always taken in the PM's office. In fact, one of the foreign secretaries, one of my batchmates, who took part in a discussion in the IIC on a book written by his colleague, he clearly stated foreign policy is not made in the Foreign Office, it's all made in the PM's office. So it's a very highly concentrated form of arrangement, which might work or not work. It all depends on how the new foreign secretary, the new foreign minister, and the national security advisor. For the first time, the national security advisor is not a foreign office. Right. Foreign service man is a police officer. How this police officer is able to assess or deal with or participate in foreign policy decision making is something that remains to be seen.
At this one point, the PMO will also be dependent on inputs from the territorial divisions in the MEA, So in that sense, it's not just going to be the PMO doing its own thing. I mean, they will be relying on
they do get
the territorial inputs coming in from those divisions. So it's not going to be just the PMO itself. There is a collective kind of a thing that will happen.
All right, so let's see where the PMO can take everybody along. I want to get in Rajeshwari. Rajeshwari, we've talked about the broad setup of the security apparatus, but what about the challenges that you see the new government facing as far as both internal security and external security are concerned?
Personally, I think the primary challenges that they will face will be in bringing together the IB and RAW under one platform, which he's planning to do, which is highly necessary. It's been a long time since there's no proper, how can I put this, interaction between the two, if I may put it that way. It's a very raw way to say it. Okay, raw way to say it, but it's high time there is more communication between the two agencies, and this is where I think they will face a problem, but I don't think they'll face too many hiccups, given it's Doval who is going to be leading charge. As you know, RAW and IB, both of them are going to report to him, unlike the IB, which otherwise reports to the Home Ministry. In this scenario, I would also like to bring in the appointment of General V.K. Singh to donor. I mean, you bring that in his appointment as Minister of State for External Affairs and for donor, and you bring Ajit Doval in. I don't think they're going to face too many problems, especially given the credentials all of them have. That's all.
All right, but can one rely on credentials alone for better communication? Though often the problem that has been seen is lack of communication, that you might have the intelligence input, but it's not directed.
Rajeshwari has raised an important issue about the role of the RAW in foreign policy making, because it is not just the foreign office or the foreign minister or the foreign secretary. The RAW also plays its own role in foreign policy, and it provides inputs on various aspects. And there is tension, ongoing tension between the foreign office and the RAW, and also tension between the RAW and the IB, because RAW was once part of the IB. And the IB is known to have hostile relationship with the RAW. You know, the first national security advisor from the police, Mr. M.K. Narayanan, people complained that he was hostile towards the RAW. At the same time, the present national security advisor is also from the IB, like Narayanan. Therefore, I don't know what sort of relationship he will be able to build up with the RAW. But I suppose both the RAW and the IB would be reporting to the national security advisor, unlike in the past when they both could go direct to the Prime Minister. So there is a lot of, the situation is full of complexity and potential tensions. Like it happened during the Prime Ministership of Manmohan Singh, as recorded very well by Sanjay Barrow. So I would just wait and watch.
All right, but as far as the internal security challenges are concerned, so let's talk about specifics. Maoists haven't been talked about during this entire election campaign. And how does Narendra Modi tackle that? Because he's one who said we need to take hard decisions. The BJP has been the one who's been always saying that we need to take hard decisions. What hard decision can you take? And can you?
Well, they have already taken a hard decision in the sense of deploying, aircraft to suppress Maoist violence. But the problem of Maoism in India is a very complex one, and there are two different channels of advice which have flowed to Manmohan Singh in the past. One was from the IB, and the other from the Planning Commission. The IB says that Maoism is the biggest internal security threat to India. But this is directly contradicted by the Planning Commission, which says it's not a security threat, it's more a developmental challenge. So the Planning Commission has written a 40 to 50 page report by 18 subject matter specialists. It's a very solid, very serious and very powerful report. Unfortunately, the report has been sidelined under Mr. Chidambaram's time. And they have more or less gone along with the IB analysis that Maoism is an internal security threat of the highest order. And therefore this very analysis leads to solutions which follow from the analysis. If you say that is the biggest internal security threat, what is the solution? Solution is the deployment of paramilitary forces, deployment of the army, deployment of aircraft, and so on. That is what the policy which was adopted by Chidambaram in his time. He was not allowed to deploy the army. He was only allowed to the extent of deploying the paramilitary forces. But this present government is not constrained by any such argument. The Cabinet Committee on Security repeatedly refused Mr. Chidambaram's request for the deployment of the army, but in the present government, I am sure that they will deploy the army much more strongly and try to suppress the Maoist movement completely. And Mr. Doval is being a police officer and IB man. He will certainly follow the line of the government.
All right, I want to get in Gautam Naulakha. He's a civil liberties activist. Thank you very much for coming in, Gautam. But as Mr. Subramaniam just said, it will be very hard decisions as far as Maoists are concerned. And there have been questions that have been raised in the past as well about high-handedness of security officials. And as far as human rights are concerned, question marks over that. So what would your take on the new government and its security challenges be?
I agree with Mr. Subramaniam. I think he has brought attention to a very important dimension of the whole issue which concerns the so-called internal security. Our security obsession makes us blind to social realities, and we look at it only in terms of how to address this militarily. That's the only approach the government has had, and that is going to carry on under the NDA. And there is clear indication it's going to escalate. I mean, today's newspapers carry this news item that the Chhattisgarh government had requested 21 helicopters to be used for targeted attacks on the Maoist camps to finish once and for all the so-called Maoist insurgency. Now, the government may not have conceded 21, but they've conceded a fair number. So we are going to see a step up in this escalation of war making in the name of trying to bring development. The real underlying issue, as Mr. Subramaniam very eloquently brings out, is the issue is finally at the ground level is what are you going to do with those forest areas where the people are resisting their being taken over because it's linked with the livelihood and the right to life issues. It's a question of are you going to push in mineral mining corporations in this area, unmindful of what the local population has to say? Are you going to completely subvert the Forest Right Act, which had already begun under the UPA? Is this process going to carry on? What we are going to see is therefore an escalation of tension and the conflict in the coming in short and medium term.
All right. The important thing to remember, sorry to interrupt
No,
you,
go ahead.
Is that the violence has been started by the government in the first place. It's not the Maoists who started the violence. Maoist violence is a response to government violence. And the moment that two things come up, government increases its violence without sitting down for a calm and collected discussion, making reports of a very solid kind. The Home Ministry had a research and policy division in my time. I was the longest serving director of the research division, and I had to write reports for the minister, for the Home Secretary, the Prime Minister, and so on. In those days, discussion was possible. Although they may not agree to my suggestion, certainly discussion was possible. But today, the Home Ministry's research and policy division has ceased to exist. Home Ministry has been increasingly paramilitarized. Now it's more like a paramilitary ministry than the Home Ministry, because in the earlier period, Home Ministry was also responsible for the protection and development of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, in which I have participated. Now the meetings which are held in the Prime Minister's office regarding the Maoist violence, the scheduled castes and scheduled tribe ministers are not called at all, because they are the victims of violence of the state as well as in the civil society violence. And if those ministries and ministers are not participating in the Maoist violence is a response to violence against scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. So if these ministers are not participating in the discussion in the PM's office, the discussions are meaningless. I don't know how Mr. Doval is going to solve the problem. He is basically a police officer with a police mindset. You can't blame him because he's been trained like that. So that's the problem.
All right, another major problem, Surya, would be the counter-terrorism infrastructure. Terror is something that the BJP had really taken on the UPA government on. We had 26/11, we had repeated terror attacks. How do we see the government handling that?
I think since 26/11, there has been a certain beefing up of the internal security apparatus, at least in terms of surveillance, monitoring, that kind of stuff. You have these NSG hubs that have come up in various parts of the country. But somehow, when you look at that cop in the street, with his lathi out there, the general sense you get is you don't have any confidence in this fellow. You go to a police station, it's the same thing, There's a lack of credibility in the kind of police systems that we have, So ultimately, internal security is all about governance and corruption and how people like that policeman out there behave. And I don't see any effort by your average politician to look at that, There are scores of reports out there. Which are detailing
in
methods
this book,
in which
Mr. Subramaniam's book, in fact, is a seminal work on police reform.
Well, I have given it to the Home Ministry.
That's where the problem is.
They have not got back to me.
All right, Gautam, you wanted to come in. Go ahead, please.
I'd like to come in here, please.
Yes, go ahead.
I want to make one point. It's very interesting. Our security obsession blinds us also to address the issue of this police.
Yeah.
I mean, what does police mean in this country?
Yeah, exactly.
We assume that the police means civil police. Unfortunately, as far as the security apparatus in this country is concerned, when they think of a police, they're thinking of armed constabularies. So when you talk about that we have that an average, there should be one policeman for 550 persons rather than 773, which currently operates, what we fail to address is it armed police you're asking for or civil police which is meant for law and order duties? The people that we see around us. And it's these people who look at crime detection and prevention. And we are at their mercy. So imagine situations like what happened in Gurgaon and all. These get neglected or these propound or they proliferate primarily because there is such security obsession that we have empowered our police forces and they feel that they enjoy impunity in this country and social sanction to get away with anything. And it's this that addresses us. So security obsession is a much bigger threat than either UP or NDA is capable of addressing or changing.
All right, but then isn't that, Gautam, also convenient? I mean, for a nation suddenly to be obsessed with security, that means that you can just direct thoughts in one direction and not bother about the other things, and that has often paid good electoral dividend as well.
Look, may I say something?
Yes, go ahead.
The security obsession of the government is a direct outcome of lack of information in the Home Ministry. Because the Home Ministry basically believes in information provided by a police organization, which is the IB. Now, you need information from different sources. I was telling you that the Planning Commission has prepared a wonderful report. That report has been completely sidelined. Why? Neither the Indian police, nor the IB, nor the research and analysis wing have any charter of duties or legal framework. Well, the police have a legal framework, but the RAW and the IB do not have a legal framework, nor any charter of duties. They are simply functioning as they like. At the command of the political masters of the day, whether they like it or not, they do certain things, and as they like it, certain reports are produced, but they are not really fully rounded, capable reports. And therefore, I think there is a major information policy and managerial crisis in the Union Home Ministry. That has to be addressed.
I think that structuring problem.
The structural problems is very serious.
All right, but Gautam, I had asked you a question. I would want you to respond before I go across to Rajeshwari.
No, your question is that what do we do?
Yeah.
Right? It boils down to this. My counter question is that we have tried out one kind of policy over the last 66 years. We face a political movement or a dissidence of some kind or a popular movement demanding this, that, and everything. The course of the method used by the government is to prevaricate and then to clamp down hard on it. My point is that it's high time we start looking at things because we face great danger. If the army is increasingly going to be used for internal security purposes, then please understand that its discipline, its morale is going to come down.
Yeah.
The separation between the armed forces and, that they are kept in cantonment during peace times is primarily so that civilian life does not afflict a kind of disciplined force that you require for the armed forces. What we have done is we have blurred the distinction by allowing army to be deployed in all kinds of situations, from Jammu and Kashmir, northeast, and now to in the central India. So what are we heading for? We are creating a bigger problem in terms of security by empowering our armed forces and disempowering the citizens when it comes to the question of justice. Because in none of the armed conflict areas do people can have right to recourse to a criminal court if there is a crime that has been committed on them. There is not a single instance from Jammu and Kashmir or from Northeast. And Mr. Subramaniam will vouch for this fact. So my question is that when we talk about security, let's look fairly and squarely at what security means and what it implies for us and what are the consequences of following one type of military approach that we followed so far, rather than resolving the policies, issues politically and democratically. And it's high time we address these issues.
Look, I would like to mention also the situation in the Northeast, where security issues are very, very serious. I have written 2 books. And the second book is one book has been printed, the other book is still under press. But what is happening in the Northeast should require much greater discussion than has been possible. You know, the Armed Forces Special Powers Act and the indefinite fast for the last 14 years by a single woman, Irom Sharmila Chanu. These are all extremely important developments, and you know, the human rights violations on a very big scale, which is going on in Nagaland, Assam, Manipur, even Tripura, and so on. These are the 4 major conflict-affected states. The situation in Tripura has improved to some extent, but they are still using Armed Forces Special Powers Act. The whole idea, deployment of central paramilitary forces, particularly the Assam Rifles, which is a colonial force which is not required now. In my book, I have brought out the fantastic increase in civilian police strength in the Northeast. Right. At the same time, Assam Rifles with 46 battalions is also continuing, and all sorts of paramilitary forces are being posted in the Northeast. What for? Fear of China. Why? Why are you so afraid of China?
Are we going to overcome these fears? Do we see a resurgent India, as many who have voted for the government have felt that was the leadership that was being provided? Will Narendra Modi and his government be able to do that?
Well, if you look at some of the language that has emerged from the Modi administration in the last couple of weeks, you have a very articulate and very in Kiran Rijiju, in the MOS home, who's talking of moving into unsettled border areas and making them more Indian in that sense, you know. And we've also seen Modi doing the kind of things he did at the swearing-in ceremony. So there seems to be some kind of a more muscle flexing kind of response to China. At the same time, he's also reaching out to the Chinese on investment and all that. So there's going to be a calibrated move in that direction. Whether he's going to reverse that decision to send the BSF to, I think, the Nagaland border with Myanmar or somewhere, I'm told there's some talk of posting the BSF in that area. I'm not sure if any final decision has been taken on that. But this talk of bringing in more paramilitary forces, yes, I am not sure if that's a good thing at all. The real need there is development, I think, and infrastructure development. I don't see much happening on that score.
See, there's a hidden conflict. Sorry, Rajeshwari is not able to get her time. The hidden conflict between the Defense Ministry and the Home Ministry on the issue of deployment of paramilitary forces and the military and the use of Armed Forces Special Powers Act. It is something which is hindering any sort of objective view on the Northeast. Now, he was raising the issue of deployment of BSF in the border areas. I don't know, Nagaland or more perhaps
I think towards the Myanmar side.
Myanmar side. Now, that is a problem which has been created by, I think, the Assam Rifles. Assam Rifles says it has more expertise in internal security management in terms of, conflict, etc., but not so much border management, because border security force should be doing border security. Why Assam Rifles? Assam Rifles wants to concentrate more on internal security duties, where it's not at all good. Major human rights violations are taking place because of Assam Rifles. So it's a kind of organizational conflict in the government of India between various agencies. Internal security is being handled by so many agencies. IB is there, RAW is there, military is there, Assam Rifles is there, Northeastern Council is there. So many agencies are messing up things in the Northeast, and there is no clarity. And the Home Ministry has no time to discuss.
All right, so perhaps an MOS home from the Northeast could make the difference. But Rajeshwari, thanks for being so patient and patiently listening to on our discussion. But as far as the terror tag goes, as far as the terror issue goes, that is something that really could test the government very, very soon. It could happen anytime. That is what has been happening in the past. But do we see the tags of saffron terror and the Simi Islamic terror and those kind of nomenclatures that have dominated the discourse over the past 10 years, do those continue with the new government, or do you see terror being dealt with differently?
Very personally, I'm not sure how the government is going to act on saffron terror or all that. But as NSA, I think Doval will be rather, how can I put this, more specific on what he's targeting, in the sense he's been a go-getter. He gets stuff done. That's his identity. So I think, first of all, he's going to push for this NCPC to be created, and then his appointment has already caused Dawood Ibrahim to move to the Afghan border. I mean, you can see the kind of effect he's already had. And then what I think they must act on, though, is the Bharatiya Janata Party actually had this one sentence in their manifesto where they speak about a national maritime authority. They should actually act on it and, establish something, actually act on that promise of the National Maritime Authority. Apart from that, I think the whole idea of a unified command will be very useful to bring all the information on one platform. As was said earlier, and I don't think it would be religious in nature, at least not from the NSA's part, and that's what I believe. About the rest of the government, I'm not very sure. But yes, I think there will be more good developments on the security front, at least, from the looks of the background that he's had. And especially, it's very, it's been a good timing that his appointment has come on. I mean, if you have noted, the US just released 5 Afghan Taliban leaders, commanders from Guantanamo Bay, and Afghan Taliban. One of them, I think, was the guy Mr. Doval negotiated with during the Kandahar crisis. So I personally think there will be more action taken towards specific issues and routes, and more action towards deterrence than towards than would be a reactionary measure. I personally don't think it's going to be anything which is going to be saffron terror or anything.
All right, so that is an interesting point to wrap the discussion on. Gautam, yes, go ahead. Final comments, Gautam.
It's very interesting what happened in Pune, where the Pune police decided that Mohsin Sadiq Sheikh's killing and the subsequent rioting was an act of law and order. Okay, this was Hindu Rashtra Sena. My point is that there is and there has been a different standards by which successive governments have dealt with Hindu right-wing extremist groups in comparison to other groups. And this discrimination and favoritism is going to persist, in fact increase. So while Mr. Modi, like an elephant, has one kind of teeth to show and another kind of teeth to eat, so Mr. Modi can pretend to be the generous, all-encompassing man. Underneath, all the bad things that are happening in the society are coming to fore, and the instances of communal rioting or targeting, etc., have increased since this government has come to power.
All right, fair enough. So, on that rather cautious note, final comments, gentlemen. Do we see the government being more, as Rajeshwari put it, do we see the government being more reactionary or taking decisions that are more in terms of that act as deterrence?
Well, I will wait and see, because the initial moves in any case are indicating conflicts at the top as well as at the bottom. It all depends how Mr. Modi is able to analyze situation and what sort of information he gets, what sort of information he likes, what sort of things that Mr. Ajit Doval, who is the preferred person by this thing, what is he going to do? How is he going to respond? As far as I know, Doval is a man part of the problem. He is a part of the problem in the sense, solution requires out-of-the-box thinking. That is what Mr. Modi is asking for. Whether Mr. Doval can do out-of-the-box thinking, being very much a part of the establishment thinking.
Yeah, he's been the shadow NSA for 10 years.
Well,
He's been deputy prime minister.
No, in the Vivekananda Foundation, where he was director for so long, he's been interacting with a number of foreigners and foreign scholars and visitors and so on. But to what extent that is acceptable to foreign office people? How do they react to all these discussions that are going on in the Vivekananda Foundation? All that raises a number of very critical issues for which I would wait for the next opportunity for discussion.
We certainly would. We certainly would. Surya, final word. One piece of advice if you had to give Narendra Modi or the NSA.
I think the real test for this government is what happens if there is a repeat of 26/11. How does it react? How does it respond? What does Modi do or not do? I think that's really the test that's going to
somebody might
tell us what Modi is all about.
Yeah.
So there has been a lot of talk. Rajeshwari, you wanted one final word before we wrap this up, right?
Sure. I think what I think is what the government would need to do would be to reinvigorate the National Security Council Secretariat. It was supposed to be the government's in-house think tank on security issues, but it's like largely dependent on the NSA now. I mean, if they were given more space to do their research and like as a think tank, it's their job to explore more out-of-the-box options, as was said earlier. That would be quite helpful. That's what I believe.
All right, so let's wait and watch whether, as the cliche goes, wait and watch for the out-of-the-box thinking, whether that comes through or whether it's more conventional policing that happens across the country.
That's more likely to my mind.
All right, on that note, we'll wrap it up. Thank you very much, Rajeshwari and Gautam, for coming here on Google Hangout. And thank you very much, Surya and Mr. Subramaniam, for coming.
Thank you very
It's
much.
a pleasure
Thank
having you on the
Thank
show.
you.
Well, that was a little presentation on the security apparatus of India, how that is going to change. We'll wait and watch to how that changes, and we'll be discussing that in the future for sure. Thanks so much for watching.